see, but there are over 100 people that signed up to join in today, which is incredibly, incredibly exciting. It also means that the style of teaching I usually do, which is much more interactive, is going to be hard to pull off with so many people, because I'm not actually able to see all of you at once, but I can see the chat function. And Gina is going to help me through my Luddite inabilities to screen share and so on. I have practiced like I do Mussar, but I was not able to conquer my inability to do those things. So mostly you're going to hear my voice. And today I'm going to try and give you a lot of information to kind of jumpstart being part of what Mussar is and understand it and begin to practice right away, even during this session today and through this week, so we can take advantage of the time we have together, and you can already start practicing at home. So I'm thrilled that so many people want to become more mensch-like in their lives. And I wouldn't say want to become a mensch, but say more mensch-like, because
oops, sorry.
Luckily the computer tells me things. I know you're already mentioned, you're already good people, ethical people, but signing up for this class to me means that you want to do better. And I want to cover a lot of ground. So again, it's not my style, but I will be reading a lot just so I cover all the information. But if you wave your hand, or if you push the button that says I need to ask a question, I will do my best to answer it. If I don't notice and I keep going, please put your question in the chat, and I will try to answer at the end of our hour today or next week, because I'll review the questions that you put in the chat. I want to just say that I want to give all honor to those of you who have never studied Mussar at all before. And if you have not, just raise your hand if you're brand new. So I say kol hakavod to all of you. There's quite a few. All honor to you. And to those of you who I know have been studying Mussar for quite a while, some of you 7 or 8 years already, kol hakavod to you too, because I know that studying Mussar is something that we do for our whole lives. And I give a lot of honor to those of you who have been trying and succeeding and stepping back and moving forward again, and maybe want a little shot in the arm to keep going and to think maybe a little bit differently about how to approach Mussar. I also hope at the end of these 3 sessions that many of you will begin coming first on Zoom and hopefully soon in person as well to our Shabbat Mussar meditation services that happen at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, and are very ably and well led by my colleagues, Rabbi Miller and Rabbi Levine, and I think sometimes Rabbi Perlman as well. So please start doing that. And if you're not part of a Mussar group, Rabbi Levine will help you create a new group and begin studying together. I know there are groups in the synagogue that have been meeting together pretty regularly for 8 years plus. So please join that incredible opportunity to deepen your own practice and to get to know some people very, very well in a new and interesting way. So just to help you understand how Mussar is something you practice, I'm going to ask if anyone here has ever played or continues to play now a musical instrument or a sport. Any of you? Just raise your hand so everybody can see. Many of you. Many of you. How many of you got much better or even a little bit better without practicing? I do not see any hands. Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now that if you don't practice Mussar, you will not get better. It's something that we need to think about and blend in with our everyday interactions with people, with ourselves, with our thoughts. It needs to become just part of our everyday routine. The 19th century founder of Mussar, Rabbi Israel Salanter, said, as long as the candle is burning, and by the candle burning, he meant as long as we have a spark of life in us, as long as we're alive, we can make change, we can make repair. So it's a lifelong pursuit that we're jumping into or continuing on the path of. Let's just say a prayer because we are entering holy work. So we'll say the prayer for studying Torah, this time for Mussar Torah. So the prayer begins, like all of our prayers, with the formula of Baruch Atah Adonai and so on. And the last three words are la'asok b'divrei Torah, that we should engage in this study of sacred texts. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. May we enter into holy time and space, and may we partner with God in creating this holiness. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a story to help us understand where Mussar comes from and what we learned from it. So the Zen master makes his first, and I have to add pre-COVID, trip to New York City from Japan. And he goes up to one of those hot dog vendors next to Central Park, and he says, make me one with everything. The vendor fixes a steaming dog and hands it to the Zen master, who pays with a $20 bill. The vendor puts the bill in the cash drawer, slams it shut. Where's my change? The Zen master asks indignantly. And the hot dog vendor says, Master, change must come from within. Change must come from within. The changes we want to make in ourselves come from ourselves, from within each of us, and powered by our own individual commitment and motivation. Cultivating our characters is an ancient Jewish practice. It goes back to the Torah, and it's based on the Torah, where we read, when God created humans, God created them, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. In the Mussar world, what that means is that each and every person has within us the same qualities and characteristics that God has, that the divine world has, that the holiness in the world has. They're all in us. They're there already. We have courage. We have anger. We have patience. We have compassion. We have love. We have righteousness. We can tell the truth. We can be harsh. We can lie. We have all those characteristics in us innately. And we also have them in different measures. How many of you know someone who is incredibly, incredibly generous? So generous you're surprised sometimes, right? How many of you know someone who is quick to anger? It could be yourself, right? How many of you know someone who is very orderly? Like nothing's out of place, and everything's always put away, and the bed's always made, and all of those kind. Okay, so we each have all of those characteristics, but those people that you were talking about, they have them in abundance. We might have them in less measure. Now, the word measure is really important in Mussar study. The word for measure in Hebrew is midah, a measure, like you'd have a measure of flour that you need to put in your recipe. A half a cup is a measure of flour. In Mussar language, a midah is also the word for a character trait. You can see why it's the word for a character trait, because we each have them in a different measure. Now, if I were going to put you in a little group, and next week we'll be in some little groups, I might ask you to tell the people in the group which midah came to mind when I just started talking about measure and how much we have of our character. Which midah jumped to your mind as something that you have in abundance? Something you have in abundance. And which midah came to your mind that you have maybe not enough of? Maybe it would be good if you had a little more of that. Now I hope you can't see, maybe you can, but my desk is a mess. So what I'm always working on is having more seder, having more order, so that when I need to find something on my desk, it doesn't take me the time to find it. And I feel kind of good when everything is in order. I actually feel much better when everything's in order. But whatever it is in me that is abundant, that's not one of them. Some other things are abundant and I can identify them. So I want you to begin thinking, and what I'd actually like you to do right now, if you have a pen and paper, I'd like you to write down the characteristics you think you have a lot of, and the ones you think you could increase. And maybe that would help you in your life in some way. Maybe it would lead you to a better place. So do that just for a minute. If you have a pen and paper, if you don't, you can just think about it, or you can type it in some Google Keep place on your computer. Okay, how many people were able to come up with something you have a lot of that you feel you have in abundance? Okay, can someone unmute and just say what you thought of? Anybody?
Gratitude.
Okay, gratitude, you have an abundance. That's great. Could someone unmute and say what you have not enough of, if you feel comfortable sharing that?
Trust. Patience.
Patience. Someone said, I didn't hear another one. Carol, did you say patience?
Yeah.
Okay. One
Patience.
other. Patience. Patience is big today. Okay. We'll talk about patience. Okay. Who thinks they have a lot of patience? Who wishes they had less patience? Yeah. Okay. So what you already see is the Mussar path. The Mussar path is meant for us to think about where it's too abundant for our own good. And what do I mean by our own good? I worked for this class thinking, what is my definition of Mussar? What do I think of when I think I'm on the Mussar path? And I said, for me, Mussar is taking small steps, and that's huge. That's huge, small steps, right? Any small step is huge. So I want to tell you right off the bat, even if you've been studying Mussar for 8 years and you still have trouble with this midah or that midah, what I want you to ask yourself is, well, have I taken any small steps forward? So I am taking small steps as often as I can to find the right midah, and in this case, I mean the right measure of my own innate character traits. The right measure of my own innate character traits to find a sense of balance, honor, and yes, for me, a sense of the holy, a sense of the sacred in my life and in my relationships. In my life and in my relationships. And those can be different things too, and they're measured different ways. So I'll say it one more time without interrupting myself. I'm taking small steps as often as I can to find the right midah, the right measure of my own innate character traits, to find a sense of balance, a sense of honor, and yes, a sense of the holy in my life and in my relationships. That's what Mussar and the Mussar path are about. Whatever your particular current belief or non-belief about God and holiness, whether you feel a-religious but spiritual, secular or observant, Mussar practice helps us fine-tune our character traits so that there's a greater alignment between our inner world and the way we interact with the outer world. I know we all have high aspirations for ourselves. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. That's why you came to this class, because you want to fill some of those high aspirations you have for yourself. But I also know from hard personal experience that I often fall short in real life of meeting my own hopes for my behavior. I really want to be more patient, but I lose my temper. I said to some of you before everyone came on, I was supposed to, be able to get on at 20 to 4 and make sure everything was okay and have everything right. And I couldn't get in. And I could just feel my anger and worry and anxiety mounting in those minutes as the minutes ticked by. And I was imagining all of you here wondering where I was, and maybe the link didn't work, and how could that happen, and all that. And then I said, I'm teaching a Mussar class, for goodness sake. Where's my patience? Where's my equanimity? Where's my resilience? Where's my compassion for Gina, who's trying to help me get in here? But that happens. No matter how hard we try, those don't always align. Or maybe you want to stop gossiping, stop lashon hara, saying things that you shouldn't say. But you can't resist how it fuels your ego. When we know something, we want to share it, it makes us feel kind of powerful. And maybe you plan to be generous, but in the moment that's ripe for giving, you close your heart. How come? Once again, I thought I wanted to be generous. How come I'm not generous? Or perhaps you should speak up in a group, but each and every time you let all those other people talk instead. They fill every gap. You don't jump in. You don't assert yourself. You're the quiet one. You just sit there. Change comes when we have the courage to look within ourselves. And you'll hear me, I think, say this more than once. Mussar teaching is very clear about this. If I asked you what change you think the people in your life need to make, you might have a list. How many of you would have a list of the things you would like the people in your life to change? Right? We all know exactly how that person needs to change. Mussar says, to us, change must come from within. Within whom? Within me, within yourself. Don't go telling someone else, oh, I just learned about this great midah and I really think you should work on it in your life. That is not the point of this. The point of Mussar is to look at that person and say, you were created b'tselem Elohim. You were created in God's image. My job is to honor you, to honor that image in you. What do I need to change to help me understand that's my job and that's what I'm going to be working on? How to honor not only the other person in your life, but ourselves. If we start with honoring ourselves, if we start with understanding who we are, that we're human, we're imperfect, we're only going to take small steps, but we're going to take steps. And when we fail, we're going to say, darn it, now I learned why in that situation I need to do this instead of that. Then we've moved along a small step on the Mussar path. Now, some of the Mussar teachers talk about a path, but the ones I like talk about a ladder, a madriga, ladder, and you take a step a little bit high. Now, of course, we go down the ladder sometimes too, but the idea of rising up appeals to me in the sense of dignity and honor. Like when we sit in meditation, the teachers often say, sit with dignity. The Mussar path asks us not only to sit and live and act with dignity, but to honor the people around us, no matter who it is, with that same measure, that same midah of dignity as well, honor and compassion because of their humanity. So I know that there are many veteran Mussar studiers in this group, and I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, if you could type into the chat a midah that maybe you picked for your own spiritual curriculum. You set your goals out when you first started studying Mussar, and you keep coming back to it. It's just one you work on a lot. So if you don't mind, if you could put those in the chat, just so people can see how these midot work in people's lives. Just put some of those in. I see a couple. And while they're typing, while people are thinking and typing, Gina, if I could ask you to put the first screen share up, that would be great.
I will do that, and you work on your patience with me, okay, Rabbi Shanks?
I will. I'm working on it.
Okay.
So before they go away, patience, gratitude, equanimity, patience, trust. Oops, I lost my look. Trust, gratitude, patience. Boy, everybody needs more patience. Silence, alacrity, meaning kind of get up and go. Order. Oh, I'm joined with my order need. Silence, alacrity, patience, self-esteem, patience. Okay, patience is going to win today. Everybody needs patience. And I didn't need patience for Gina because she got this up so quickly. So that, Gina, is there a way to make it smaller so we can see more of the sheet?
Oh, sure. Everybody told me make it larger, make it larger.
Well,
I can make it smaller.
Well, we just need to see a few more.
You tell me when to stop, Rabbi.
Maybe if you take away the top margin thing, is there a way to X that out?
There is not.
Okay. So yeah, so we don't want to hide that. Okay, let's stop right there. That's enough for now. So what you see on this sheet, oh, that's better. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
We like that. Thank you. What you see are some of the many midot. Now, when Mussar started in the 19th century, they started with 18 core midot that were based on the characteristics of God that are described in the Torah. And again, that link between us being created in God's image and those characteristics that God has, we were meant to imitate God and to do our best to be like God. So you'll see just a few of them. And again, this is a lot of this is for people who have not jumped into Mussar at all. And I want to just give you a little taste of the many different midot there are. And that it's been expanded since that 18. There are many, many more now. And almost any characteristic can be part of the Mussar path. But you see it starts with humility, anava. And these little sayings underneath were actually almost all written, and I adapted a couple of them by Temple Isaiah's member, Jane Sedley. I don't know if Jane's on the screen today, but Jane, if you are, thank you. And be sure and thank Jane when you see her. Jane decided to write her own catchphrase to remember through the week or month that she was studying these different midot, to meditate on that catchphrase, that mantra. And she wrote these, and I use them to help you see that you can write your own as well. You can put a little post-it on your computer the week you're doing a certain midah, and you can think about it when we get to the practice of what the 3 steps are to make some progress on the Mussar path. You can use that as a reminder in your head before you act, before you make a choice about how to act. So let's start just with anava. In his book, I hope you were able to get copies, if you didn't have it, copies of Alan Marinis's book, Everyday Holiness. If you can, it's a great textbook for you for the rest of your life. People go through this book several times. And for next time, I would love it if you could read the introductory material. I'm not going to refer to it too much here because you have it in the book and I don't need to repeat it. And if you're not able to get the book, get a hold of the book, let me know and I'll help you make sure you can get it. So our teacher, Alan Marinis, does start with anava. And I think it's a good place to start. And we're going to start with that today. This is going to be our practice midah, And we're about to jump into another piece of learning. So if there are any questions that are just burning about what I've just taught, please let me know in the chat. Here's some more of the midot that were written: trust, alacrity, order. Let's see if there are any new ones. Oh, show the other 6. We will show them. Yeah, thank you, Gina. The list is in the chat. The link to the list is in the chat. You don't even have to take a screenshot. Gina put it in the chat and it'll take you to the whole document. Any other questions? I don't see any right now. Okay, so Gina, you can actually take off the screen share. And if you have trouble finding that link, it's at the very top of the chat. And I believe Gina put it in more than once. So you can scroll up and find the link and go to it. So why start with humility? Why start with humility? Humility, anava, can also be translated, and my other Mussar teacher, one of many, Rabbi Mark Margolius, doesn't like humility. He likes better the word balanced self. Balanced self. When we say humility in a Jewish context, we might think of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our greatest teacher of all time. The Torah ends by saying no one ever reached the pinnacle, But how was he described? What was the word that was used for Moses? He was the most humble. No one was ever as humble as Moses. Now, that's a little bit of a confusing statement. Moses, humble. Not exactly what you think about Moses when you see him up on Mount Sinai in your mind, and he's getting the 10 Commandments and he's yelling at the Israelites and they're yelling at him and he's giving these beautiful sermons. But Moses knew how to measure his balanced self. I think that's what the commentators on Moses's life were trying to teach us. Moses knew when to rebuke, when to yell, when to castigate. And Moses also knew when to listen. When to listen. He knew when to take up all the air in the room, and he knew when to give his brother Aaron or his sister Miriam or the 70 tribal leaders their due. Then it was their turn. So even if we imagine that at one end of the spectrum are the continuum of humility, if we put at one end a shrinking violet, someone very, very quiet, very humble, and the opposite of that at the other end of the continuum, who would be holding up that other end? Perhaps you would answer a braggart or an egomaniac or a narcissist, someone who is all about me, never about anyone else. And you might be right and you might not be right in the Mussar world. Why is that? Because like Moses teaches us, there are times when you need to be very quiet and humble in a situation. And there are times you need to be humble in your exhortation in a situation. Maimonides, the great 12th century philosopher, taught us we strive to be halfway between pride and self-abnegation. Somewhere in the middle, Maimonides says. Somewhere in the middle. The 2nd century Rabbi Hillel said, and you know this is a really good phrase to keep in your mind when you think about how you want to be in the world, what your balanced self is going to look like. Hillel said, if I am only for myself, who am I? Right? If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Let me put it in the right order. Hillel said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am so shrinking that I don't have anything to say for myself, who would join me in my pursuit of life and living in the world? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? If I'm off the continuum, I'm not a human, Hillel is saying. I'm not a human. I'm something else. I'm something else that needs to learn to come back to where I need to be. And of course, if not now, when? And Hillel ends with that, if not now, when? I think as our call to action to be on this Mussar path, to say, who am I in the world? How much space do I take up at which times? Am I brave enough? Do I have enough self-regard to speak when I know I want to speak? Or do I have so much self-regard that I'm the only one that speaks? And again, that's why this makes me so uncomfortable, having to talk and talk and talk and not let all of you talk as well. Humility, says Bachya Asher, a medieval Jewish ethicist, humility is the intermediate quality between arrogance and self-effacement. But it does not mean that we disgrace ourselves or allow others to tread upon us. So Moses is that good example. He didn't let anybody walk all over him. When he did, there was big trouble in the Israelite community. And the famous Hasidic sage Rabbi Simcha Bunim teaches, each person, and you've heard this one, many of you as well, each person should have 2 pockets. So she can reach into one or the other according to the moment, according to the need. In the right pocket are the words, "For my sake was the world created." What does that tell us? We're God's image. We're dignified. We have honor. We should claim our own honor and give that honor to other people. But on the other hand, in the other pocket, it should say, "I am but dust and ashes." And how humbling is it? And another lesson from Mussar, how humbling is it to know that we don't have all the time in the world that we thought we were going to have, that we hoped we had. And this year, more than ever, I think we have learned to feel in our ennui of being at home and stuck and not doing what we thought, we've been made at the same time to feel time is short. Time could be shorter than we ever imagined. Time was short for all those 500,000 people struck down. So what do we have in both our pockets? The sense of dignity, of humanity, a sense of our own honor in the world, but we also have the sense of urgency that is going to be important, that we understand our own selves in relation to the rest of the world and how short a time there is to make decisions about how we are in the world, who we are in the world, what we want to be in the world. And my favorite sayings about humility actually come from Yiddish sayings, and I wish I knew the Yiddish and could tell them to you. And if anybody knows how to say these in Yiddish, please, you can unmute and say them. But the ones that I found say, "If you bend down too much, people walk on your head." So you shouldn't be so humble because people are going to take advantage. And better to die upright than to live on your knees. We are not meant to be humbled, but we are meant to be humble when it is appropriate. So I'm going to ask you now to think about your own self in relationship to anava, to humility. And I'm just going to even ask you just to close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths. If you feel comfortable, if you don't have to close your eyes. You can just have a kind of a soft focus. But I'm going to ask you a few questions to just teach you how to get into the idea of change and change on this Mussar path. So imagine yourself in a group, perhaps maybe a small group. It could be just one other person. And think about if you notice, as you imagine yourself in that group or with a person, do you notice if you tend to feel invisible or disappear even in some settings? And in that case, anava, working on this midah of humility, could help us, help you, help me speak up and assert ourselves. And if we notice that we tend to overstep or interrupt or take up too much time and space, we see how anava can help us pull back and make room for others. If we notice our tendency to distance ourselves from others by judging them as better or worse than us, now imagine yourself in that group. Someone else is talking. And what do we say sometimes? Well, if he weren't talking so much, I'd have something to say. It's his fault that I'm not talking. So we're judging ourselves, we're judging others. And we see that anava, that having a balanced self, can help restore our sense of being and know in our hearts that we're on equal par with everyone else. We have the same dignity. We have the same divine spark in us as everyone else. When we forget or fail to access anava, this balanced self, we're prone to overinflate or underinflate ourselves. As a result, we may overstep boundaries with others, or we may feel disrespected by them. We may compare and despair, judging ourselves unworthy in relation to others. Or we might pump ourselves up by disparaging those other people. So I ask you just to, you walk through that imaginary moment. And I want to ask if anyone had a picture in your head of a time that happened to you. Were you in a situation where maybe you felt like you took up too much space, or you didn't have enough space, or someone else did, and what that actually felt like? Anybody want to unmute and describe that? Sandy Anderson, did you raise your hand? No. I can't see everybody. Anybody have a situation like that? Joni, you need to unmute. You have to unmute. Thank you.
Okay. With Zoom, sometimes it's really hard to have conversations, and you try to be polite with people, but you sometimes when in the middle of a discussion, you can't get in because someone's always talking, and sometimes you're talking over each other, and it's really hard. It's so uncomfortable sometimes to want to just say, wait, I'd like to add something, but people just keep going over each other. And especially in a social situation, it makes it much harder. When you're in a group that's a little bit organized, it works better. But if you don't have ground rules, it makes it very uncomfortable. And it happens a lot. At least I've seen it a lot.
And where are you in that imbalance? Are you in the, I just shut down, I just get quiet?
I do. I shut down and get quiet, and just because it's like a battle, and I don't want to do that, and it becomes uncomfortable. So it's easier for me just to shut down.
We can do one more. Did anybody think of another one? Hopefully also in real life. Zoom is real life for us now. I know that. But there are issues that make it even more difficult. Shirley, you have to unmute.
Hello, I'm in a small Zoom group every week with my friends from Wisconsin. And I think there are 4 of them, possibly 5, and me. And we get together every Friday afternoon and talk about our week and mostly what we're cooking for dinner and stuff like that. But I get so excited to be with these friends, and on a small Zoom, it's okay. What Joni was saying is true. It doesn't work on a big one, but on a small one, you can. And I talk too much, and I feel like it's their group, and I'm.
It's their group, and what? Oh, I lost Shirley. She froze. She'll come back. So I'm going to ask Gina. Thank you, Shirley. When you come back, we're going to be happy to have you. I'm going to ask Gina to put the second screen share up, please, because we're going to look at that, and I'm going to give you a little homework for next time. Gina, are you there?
I am, and this time you have to be a little bit patient with me. It was there, and now I don't know where
My
it was.
patience is building by the minute.
You sound remarkably patient. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. Someone can unmute while we wait and just describe an experience of realizing you took up too much space or too little space in any kind of situation. Usually it's after it happens that we realize it. Anybody, you can raise your hand if you want. Sheila.
Well, mine is similar to Joni's, but in a real life situation, often I take a class and there's somebody in it who irritates me. It's like, it's me, I guess. There's always somebody, and I don't do anything about it but get irritated. And people who tend to take up too much room.
Well, that's a great intro to what I'm going to do next. Even if we don't have the screen share, and when Gina gets it, we'll have it. Or otherwise, you'll be able to get it from the chat. But there are 3 steps I'm going to introduce for you to try. And Sheila's example is good. Joni's, Shirley's works too. We find ourselves in these situations. Here we go. Good. So look,
Yay.
Thank you, Gina, yay. So look in the middle where it says 1, 2, 3. These are the 3 steps. You're sitting in that meeting, there's that person that won't be quiet. And you feel the irritation mounting. Mussar teaches us to put some distance between the match. So the match is that person talking too much, and the flame. And the flame is our building irritation. Pretty soon we're not enjoying the group. We're not getting anything out of it. We're thinking about something else. We're doing our email if we're on Zoom. And we've lit the flame of our anger. Our patience is gone. All these midot that we're working on are out the window. But we can do something different. We can put some space between the match and the flame. And the very first thing we do is we just get curious. Instead of that habitual response, let's just look at what we're feeling as if we were an observer from the outside. So I'll look at myself and I'll say, oh, I feel my heart rate going faster. I feel myself about to have a hot flash. I'm so angry. My body is responding. I'm just going to look at that. I'm going to think about it. Quiet your inner critic and note where the midah has an impact on your emotions. So we're feeling left out. We're feeling insignificant, perhaps, but I'm just going to look at those unemotionally as I can. Now, this takes practice. Remember, we talked about practice. It takes practice. Instead of responding habitually, take a minute of heat lamdut. Heat lamdut is just self-curiosity, looking at the situation as if you're a fly on the wall. Don't judge that person. Don't judge yourself. Just think, I get anxious when someone is talking too much. I feel less than that person. Maybe that person doesn't care about my opinion. There's no listening. I started to talk and someone else ran right over me because they were already thinking about how they wanted to respond. So step 1 is just separate out what we're feeling and think about it. Step 2 is the Behira point. Behira means choice. I'm going to make a choice. What are my choices? Because we always have more than one choice. We always have more than one choice. We can do what we habitually do, each and every time this happens. Or we can look around again from a non-judgmental perspective and say, what are my options? What are my options? I might have more than one option. Let me think about what those are. And this is especially important because we're working out how to be a mensch. I can get irritated and yell at that person, or I can think, how can I honor this person? How can I have patience? How can I be grateful? How can I be kind? What are my options if I want to be all of those things? And then step 3, we practice tshuva. Now, of course, this is all happening in nanoseconds. This is not 5 minutes. I mean, it might be if the person is really going on and on and on, but this is happening very quickly in your mind, and we practice it so that we begin to do it a little bit better each time. Practice tshuva. Tshuva means return, returning to your intention. What's my intention? My intention is a balanced self. My intention is to find that place where I have honor and I give honor to other people. That's what a mensch does. So I'm going to choose now what to do. Someone put in the chat, you can leave or you can, speak up. But there are actually other options as well. On Zoom, there are other ones. You could type in, I love what you're saying, but I'd love to hear from other people too. There are lots of ways to pick and choose and do tshuva, meaning return to the intention that we had when we started the call. We started the interaction. We started with the intention of learning from the situation, from giving to the situation, and from honoring ourselves. Those are the 3 steps I want you to practice this week. We have a couple of minutes. I said I would stop in time for people to ask questions. And on this sheet, there are also other midot that you might want to pick instead of anava, but you can pick whichever ones. There's 3 here, 3 for, Gina, maybe you can move up a little on the screen. Gina?
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
That's okay. Could you just scroll up so we can see the 3 midot that are at the bottom of the page? So there's patience. Patience won the raffle, so it's good it's on here. Gratitude and order. And there are instructions on this to help you walk through. And of course, you can also look in Alan Moranis's book for very, very, very detailed information and text on each of these midot. But I wanted to give you a jump start on just trying to do some of these things. So we have a couple minutes. We can take away the screen share. You can be sure and print it out for yourselves. But I want to just give you a chance to ask any questions, because I did, this was like a 6-week Mussar course condensed into 50 minutes. So I expect you to have some questions. And again, use your anava, your balanced self. If you'd rather put the question in the chat, you're welcome. Or raise your hand and I'll try and see you. I can only see one screen at a time. Anyone have a question? Heidi. Hi, Heidi. I didn't see you.
So nice to see you and be
Nice
here.
to see you too.
So how does a Mussar group really work? Like you have like this intention and your midah, but do you study how does it work?
Well, I think each group probably works a little differently. The groups at Temple Isaiah did start with a class like this. So you kind of got the idea of what Mussar was. And then sometimes I would come to the group and help them. And I know the rabbis will do that still, again, by Zoom now, but to keep the momentum going. And each group kind of went in its own direction. But the basic idea is that the group would take a midah, let's say it was patience, and they would read the texts about it, and they would say for the next 2 weeks, usually they meet twice a month, for the next 2 weeks, we're all going to focus on patience. And there are other techniques, which I didn't talk about today, I'm going to talk about next time, to embed this Mussar practice in ourselves. Chanting a phrase, saying a phrase, meditating, journaling. All of these are really important ways of keeping track of how we are doing. Are we climbing up the ladder? Are we stuck at the bottom somewhere? Why do I study patience for 2 weeks, and when someone cuts me off in the car, I just honk that horn instead of saying, oh, that person must be rushing to the hospital. I hope he gets there in time to make sure, because that just lowers your blood pressure right there. Oh my gosh, I missed that red light, that green light. I get to look at the clouds. That is amazing. I'm gonna make the most of this minute. My friend is late for lunch. Oh, I get to just sit at this, well, we used to, right? Sit at this lovely restaurant and just look at the people around me and enjoy that. So we say these phrases so that we train our brains to change. And then we come back to our group and we say, these were my small steps, my small successes. These were my small defeats. This is where I wish I could have done better. This was my intention. And the sharing, it's not a therapy in any, in some ways, because it's talking, but it's not therapy. And it's not for me to say, well, Heidi, if you would just do, this when you're at the stop sign, you would be a much better person. Again, that's not what it's about. It's all about, how are we growing and changing inside? What is it we're working on? And I think the support of doing it with other people is tremendous. It keeps us going. And it doesn't have to be even a whole group. I've been studying Mussar with Kenner Becker for 8 or 9 years. So it can be just 2 people. But almost every time, no matter which midah we are studying for that week, something happens during the week that we say, well, here's where I got stuck, or here's where I need some help. I need to think this through. Other questions? I have time for one more. Aliza, unmute yourself, please. Good to see you.
It seems to me, in having read some of the books and dipped my toes into Mussar, empathy is really needed in every one of the midot, that we need empathy for ourselves and we need empathy for others. And if that's not the starting point, then I feel like it's hard to jump into any of the others.
Yes, and I agree, and it's a good one-word way of saying that each person is created in God's image. Because we have empathy when we understand we're all the same. We're all the same. We're all humans. Now, that is not to say, and I get this question a lot when I teach Mussar, that is not to say there aren't evil people in the world. They were created in God's image. And they are not on a Mussar path, and they are evil. And we are allowed to be quite out of balance in our pushing back against them. Because our job is to make peace and harmony and compassion fill our lives and fill the lives of others. And we start with ourselves. And the Mussar teachers talk about this. Somewhere I have the quote, but I don't want to waste time finding it. We put order in our own house, not just order like making the bed, but understanding our own capacity for empathy and where we need to push back and have righteous anger against the inequities that we see all around us. So it's both of those things. And that's why I wanted to emphasize in this class that there's a continuum of action, there's a continuum of intention, and each situation might put us somewhere else on that continuum. One more question? I'll look at the other screen. Anyone with a hand up? So you have a lot of homework to do. There's some reading in Alan Marinis's book. Please do that. And please look over the 2 handouts that are on your screen. And I'm just so happy to be with all of you and to learn with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And talk to other people in the class during the week. You can make your own little chavruta, your own little check-in with someone else during the week. Wishing you all a safe and healthy and happy week. Take good care.